Hello and welcome to another episode of ADHD Goals. I have a wonderful guest for you today. Her name is Kim Parra, and she is a teacher, and she has been tutoring for reading for over 27 years. She herself has had struggles with dyslexia and ADHD, but she has developed a little brain hack, which we are going to talk about during the show. And it helps the brain to absorb and retain information with flashcards. And we can learn more about that at flashcardread.com. But as for now, welcome to the show, Kim. How do you do?
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Laurence. I appreciate you.
So whereabouts are you based
I'm in
today?
Alabama, South Alabama.
Alabama. Perfect. Um, so you yourself, you have dyslexia and ADHD. Do you want to tell the listeners how how are you how have you experienced that through your life?
Sure. In grade school, I noticed that I was a bit slower in learning to read. Right about second grade, things start to speed up. And I noticed that sometimes the words would transpose and I would see the word backwards. So I don't know the name of that type of dyslexia, but because there's over 12 different kinds,
Mm,
but that's one of the forms that is pretty common. And also the words would swirl around the page when we got a big page of words. I would try to focus on one word, and it appeared that the words were moving on the page, and that's pretty common for stress induced type of dyslexia. And as I was trying to develop ways of studying my brain, so that I could read more, my technique back then would be to reread the sentence over and over and over again until finally the words would steady themselves. So in a
mm.
way, I was kind of pre-flashing, but it was difficult, it was arduous, it was time consuming, and that's what slowed me down. I was at best a C average student.
Mm. And what kind of support was there at the school at the time for dyslexia?
There really wasn't any. I mean, we were at the mercy of whatever the teachers could do, and the best way that I think my second grade teacher was able to help me, Mrs. Matthews, bless her soul, was give me a ruler. So, I used a ruler, to help steady the words on the page and not swirl, and she invited me to slow down, and, she would also pick apart and use these, sentence, board, and I would write, with a wax, crayon, so to speak, and that would help, slow it down and be able to read.
Mm. So it was recognized as dyslexia earlier on.
I really don't know that. I don't have a memory of someone labeling me
Yeah.
with dyslexic tendencies, but I know that really great teachers see patterns and they develop, unique ways of handling them. So I am grateful to Matthews for seeing that in me and figuring out a way around it. But it's upsetting to our dyslexics friends and our ADHD friends, especially if you've got it on top and you've got an attention problem. It's a multiple layered problem. And
Mm.
so getting kids to focus, to sit down in a chair, I mean, it can be, difficult at best. So I'm just grateful that I got through, to that point so that I could keep going. But honestly, throughout school, I couldn't wait to get over it. I couldn't wait to get through the rest of my school years because it was, I would never match up to the top of the class. I would never be able to cover as much information as needed in order to be, on grade level, past grade level. I was always you kind of doggy paddling to stay on board.
Yeah. I mean, I'm interested to learn little bit more about how those two, dyslexia and ADHD overlap each other, because my understanding of like what's when your ADHD tendencies are triggered, um, it's usually when your chimp brain is sort of in a a fearful situation, like at school, you're being told to read this. Everybody else seems to be reading it. I can't read it because all these words are swimming around. And then that's automatically going to, you know, shut the attention down and look for like a safe space, or can I get some dopamine from somewhere else? So the dyslexia must be quite triggering for the ADHD.
Yeah, and it's kind of wrapped up in a ball like you're describing. Once are having it, you're being told that you're not good enough. You're getting told that you're not smart enough. Maybe not straight on, but it as a child, and you want to do better, but the struggle is real, and not everyone has the skill sets to break it apart and decode each child. And so what I'm offering today is a way to help them kind of decode themselves, and a way to, in that hang time, in order to figure out and build that bridge to the information so that they can figure out the phonetics. They can figure out how things are spelled, and hopefully this will help a lot of kids and parents and teachers and administrators in the future figure out how to help these kids, not only in an easy and conventional way, but also in a very quick manner to start filling in those gaps, that me and you suffered through in grade school.
Mm.
So one of the problems is that dyslexic and ADHD kids get so far behind that how do you amass that information quickly, and how do they catch up? And so I believe that I can help with both of those problems, and in a very quick manner.
Mhm. So just before we talk about the flashcards themselves and how they work, I'm interested to know sort of what was your journey into teaching, and how that journey through the years of experience teaching and tutoring that you arrived at your discovery.
Well, like I said, I had a hard time with understanding like the whole dynamics behind it, and nor did I care. But I ended up in Okinawa, and I ended up teaching swimming. And if you've ever tried to teach swimming, it's very difficult because you've got the fear factor, and you've got to make someone believe that you're going to keep them above water, and that you're going to teach them a technique really quickly about how to keep them afloat. And so it wasn't until, I was teaching everything from babies to 80-year-olds how to swim. But I had a sergeant come to me one day and say, we have these Marines that need to know how to swim. And do you think you could help them with their 80-pound packs and keep them afloat? And so I said, sure, no problem. And so the challenge is to get down to the bottom of the pool, release their 80-pound packs, get them back up to the surface of the water, and teach them how to swim in seconds. And it's really difficult because they don't have any body fat whatsoever. They come out of boot camp, and you've got to figure out, and get in their mindset right away on how to help them the best in each individual, 18-year-old that's in front of you. And you're only 22. So, how do you tell a kid, and you're a kid still, how to swim quickly, and how do you get them to trust you? So I figured out really quickly that I was a teacher, and I didn't know it until I got through about 400 Marines, for Desert Storm in Okinawa, that I was, a natural. And, it was exciting, and you get hooked fast. It's an adrenaline rush because you're helping, save lives, and you're helping them, do what they need to do to, get their mission done. So anyway, that's how the teaching journey started. And then I started taking standard first aid, CPR, and I started teaching mass amounts of people, and kind of developing my craft on how to get the information in quickly. So it started off with I would put information on the card of whatever was needed, say for standard first aid or CPR, and then I would flash the information to myself 15 times, and then I would be able to memorize in order to get, B's on the test. I wasn't flashing 15 times back then. I was flashing more like 4 or 5, but I was able to retain that information so that I could continue to get certifications in the lifeguarding school and standard first aid with the Red Cross and stuff like that, because for me, school was very difficult, and I never imagined myself to be able to pass anything with, with the higher grades in order to be an absolute teacher. So later on, around my 30s, I would have my only child, my only son, and he would be born with a special kind of autism called audio processing disorder or central processing disorder with the neuro people. And what that means is that he can hear just fine, but he can't process audibly what is coming out of your mouth. So the workaround for that was to teach him to read. So I actually was flashing cards to my child, and he actually learned how to read at the same time and then understand what was being said to him.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Just so I just want to circle back a little bit to, because I mean, if we're watching on YouTube or on Spotify, you'll have seen the card that Kim flashed up there. But I'm like, excuse my ignorance, but I've been aware that I used to buy those cards for revision when I was at school, and I was aware that they're called flashcards. But my question is how did you know to start flashing them, as in covering them and then just revealing them? Is that what they've always been intended for, or was that something that you just stumbled upon?
That's an excellent question. So an ADHD brain, like myself, okay, time to grab the information. So one of the effects are like when, let's say you go to Quizlet and you use a digital bank there, right? Well, one of the things that we do in order to get the information is we flash it, but we only flash it one time before it goes to the next one. So what I'm proposing is I'm saying, stay on that card, stay on that digital card and flash it, because what's happening is you're using your brain like a photographer or a filmmaker would in order to encapsulate that moment in time for a longer period of time. And I stumbled across it because I was literally emotionally charged up. I had anger going on because I wanted to get into college, and I had to pass an entrance exam, and I couldn't get the information to stick to my brain. And I said, there must be something going on. And I kept tapping that digital flashcard. And then when I tapped it, I could see it in my mind's eye. And I was like, wait a minute, whatever I put on this flashcard, I can recall if I just keep flashing it. So I started recording, how many times it took until my brain was able to relax and actually get the information. And that was in between 10 and 15 times.
I mean, that's incredible, and it makes you mentioned in the information that you sent over for me to look through before, but the relationship between sort of images and words themselves, and how that's slightly different in terms of how the brain processes those.
Right. We've only been reading for about less than 4,000 years. And before that, there were pictures on caves. And from those pictures, we developed letters and sounds from those letters because we needed a larger vocabulary. But it used to be that the letter A was positioned like this upside down, and it meant the word cow. Okay. So and it meant the whole word cow, not a part of it or not just a sound. It meant cow. So over time, we took those pictures and we flipped them. And so A is now looking like this, right?
Yeah.
And we've adapted it to our needs. So reading in itself is not natural. It is not a natural occurrence. Pictures are. And for thousands of years, we have used pictures in order to communicate. And we've forgotten, kind of where we came from. And so using that information of picturing, I have kind of revamped it and helped my dyslexic and my ADHDers kind of zone in on how to get that picture, just like a photographer or a director would zoom in and try to center the information. That's exactly what I'm doing for my students.
Yeah. I mean, that's like a fascinating discovery. Um, this might be slightly off a slight tangent, but I did hear a couple of months ago a story being told on a podcast. It's the Blind Boy podcast, and he was talking about storytelling before before people were writing things down. So in the oral storytelling tradition,
Yes.
and he was talking about the Irish storytelling tradition, but he was using the reference of in Australia that the Aborigines still use this storytelling technique. So before writing a book, before we had the opportunity to write books because we hadn't discovered that yet, they would use the landscape as the book. So if they were passing stories down through the generations about whether it be the seasons or farming or whatever it was, they would be going out walking, presumably to do hunting or scavenging or whatever it was, but they would be using points in the landscape to signify indicators to tell that part of the story. And I was thinking about this in terms of, as you were saying, like to see words written down, it's a completely abstract thing. And it's a clever thing to do, but it is quite unnatural. And it made me wonder about how before the Industrial Revolution and before things were written down, how maybe what we would call a neurodiverse brain, how well they would have got on before in a world where, it was, just pictures or, before we had all this abstract information.
Or even hieroglyphics.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you mentioned Okinawa, if I pronounced that right. But
Yeah.
the the script and everything, there's it's more of a illustrative alphabet as well, like pictures as well. And I wonder, it. I mean, I'm just thinking of this question now, but is there the same level of dyslexia in those alphabets?
I actually have not delved into that, but I can tell you that most of the Asian alphabets, a lot of them, not most, I mean, I really would need to do a lot of research, but a lot of the characters come from the Chinese. They have the oldest like recollection of the beginnings of characters. The Japanese have modeled their characters, and some of the words mean the same things. I might not pronounce them the same, but some of them have stayed the same. Um, the Okinawans are a good example of like how the Ryukyu people, they don't like to be called Okinawans. They like to be called Ryukyu. But they have actually derived their own, meanings for those characters as well. And they've evolved over time. And they were like, for 1,000 or so years separated from the mainland. So we can see those evolutions and those progressions from those different alphabets, over time, as with any language, that you study. But they all have something in common, like you said. The Aborigines, um, they were collecting stories around the campfire. They didn't have a straight up written language, but they did use symbolism, and they would put them on rocks, and they would represent themselves and different animals and words and emotions. So I think that they were very intelligent people, and I think through time, we're going to understand that there are peoples that are neurodiverse. And that the best way for them to learn is through possibly using my method or even some other method of picturing, because of how many thousands of years we've used that as a tool in order to communicate.
Mm, mm. So we've touched a little bit on how the flashcards work, but do you want to tell us in detail how your method for the flashcards work and how it helps to help people learn to read.
Well, I'd like to give you an example.
Yeah.
And you have mostly listeners and not on YouTube. I'll go ahead and use the example through speaking about it. But recently, a little boy at 8 was reading no words per minute, absolutely zero. So he recently got on my website and he started watching me flash the cards in front of him, and it's like a subscription based deal. So it's really nice for the parents because they often feel like they don't know what they're doing, or they're not doing it right, or they're not doing it fast enough. So I kind of take all the guesswork out of the flashing. So, and this was sight unseen. I hadn't met the boy yet. I hadn't explained to the grandparents how it worked or anything. So it was a unique situation that I'm sharing with you because he just got on. I explained what to do, to write it down on a piece of paper or a whiteboard, whatever he was, had handy. And when he got it, he looked at his grandma and they both, started crying because up to that point, he was reading no words. And then
Mm.
suddenly, in the moment, he was reading. And so it was, disbelief. And then the other factor that we find as educators is that you might be able to get them to read, dyslexic people, but can you get them to spell? And
Hmm.
spelling is such a huge part of reading, and being able to tangibly hold on to that information and then recall is so much easier if you can get them to spell as well. And so my little friend was reading, spelling, which is unheard of. I mean, there's a lot of people that are going to say that that's impossible because of what we've done in, just one session. But it was miraculous and it was incredible. And I learned so much because what he was able to do was he wrote the word and then he crossed out his misspelled word, and then he backed up my video, and then he did it again. And then if he got it right, he wrote the correction underneath.
Hmm.
And if he did it multiple times, he showed me by crossing out, multiple times the incorrect spelling. And he didn't feel hindered by, having to do it again because I explained to him that making mistakes was part of the process for zoning in on this flashing process and the method. So for this child, the sky was the limit. He wasn't hindered by somebody overpowering him like a teacher saying, you have to hurry up and do this. He could go at his own pace. His parent and grandparent could help him because, the instructions are right in front of him. So, miracles were able to happen for this child. And I was psyched for him because, up to he's now 8 and, he
Mm.
feels like school isn't for him.
So just to be clear, that process that you were doing with the boy, you were showing one word at a time and flashing that, and that process of flashing was almost installing that word as an image so that he could recall it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And when he closed his eyes, he was able to see that image
Yeah.
so that he could use that as a tool that he hadn't had before. So that's the difference in between just, changing the words out and then holding that image still and then teaching the brain basically how to track. So I'm also teaching him how to read from left to right. I'm also teaching him rhythm. I'm also teaching him spelling. I'm teaching him phonetic banks. So everything that he's learned in school is actually in there already that his teachers have already taught him. But now I'm building a bridge to help him understand what that's for.
Mm. And something else that uh, I that you said that was interesting was that you said it was okay to make mistakes
Yeah,
because as we were sort of saying earlier with ADHD, sort of if the child feels like they're in a, well, anybody with ADHD, if they impose a threat or danger, whether that, it's not in the jungle anymore, it's because we've got to do a presentation or we've got to stand up and teach, or if we're posed with the fact of making a mistake, that perfectionism element really kicks in, and it really impair us. But How did you convince? I find it interesting that you were able to convince him that mistakes didn't matter, because I sometimes think that that's quite a hard thing to just agree with. I think sometimes people, even though you say, "Don't, it doesn't matter if you make a mistake," they still have that resistance to it.
Well, we're pre-programmed in our DNA that we need to make the right decision quickly because it hinders on our survival. And
Uh-huh.
so we no longer having to live in that world, or some of us are still living in that world, but most of us, I would say a good 60% are no longer in survival mode. So when you're trying to move from survival to thriving, then you need to give the element of um, letting them learn from their mistakes. Because if you've ever watched anybody great, like let's say Einstein, or you've read, history books on and read biographies on him, and even read some of his work, you see all the scribbles and the scratches and all the mistakes of the science behind it. And what you need in order to go forward is that you've got to put yourself out there and make those mistakes in order to really, truly, organically learn.
Mm. I can't remember who it was that said it. Was it Thomas Edison? That's, you know,
Yeah.
you only get it right once, but you probably got it wrong 99, or you
How many
failed
times make
99.
that light bulb? 1,000 times,
Yeah, yeah. So, what else, in this process of using the flashcards, how often do you recommend that it's done in order for this process to happen for the learn to read?
Well, in order for the changes to happen in the brain, because like I said, we're literally rewiring the whole entire brain. And we're making it going from a Pinto, or a Yugo to a Maserati, and we're literally changing. I mean, one day soon, my hope is that they no longer need my method. And actually, what happens from it goes from flashcard to the page, and then the child doesn't know this, or the parent doesn't know this, but as soon as this happens, you go from the flashcard to the page, it speeds up, and the amount of information that's able to be taken in, I don't even know, it's probably infinite. So once that process happens, they get really voracious and tenacious, and I get super excited because they graduate away from the coursework. So I never know exactly when it's going to happen, but when it does, we have like a little powwow, a little talk about it. I write notes about it because I'm learning and doing case studies. And then they teach me back what's been most effective. And then they tell me the things that maybe slowed them down a little bit. So as this process is evolving, um, I'm fine tuning it because, and back to your question, 2 times a day, once
Hmm.
in the morning for 10 minutes, once in the afternoon for 10 minutes.
And you mentioned there, just so I'm clear. So you held up the flashcard and it had the word on it, and you said it transitions from that to the page. What specifically is the page, or what's on the page at it? Is it the
So
word in context? Or?
any book the child might want to read. So
Mhm.
I've been hearing stories about children going down the road and reading road signs first. That seems to be the biggest thing. A mom's driving or dad's driving, they're looking out the window, they're reading stop. That was piece of cake. Next, they read the word wine and they ask mom, does wine mean juice? And it's like, no, no, where'd you read it from? That's not in our vocabulary. We don't talk about that in our family, and there's an element of like surprise that, that I'm hearing about, with, I've never taught my child wine before. How does my child know how to, say the word wine? How does he know
Mm.
that the E is silent on there? Because, what's happening is phonetically, the child has built up so many words in their brain in so many different patterns that it's reassembling those sounds in their own way. And they're able to, everybody says we have to have rules in order to follow for phonetics. And I'm saying, no, you don't actually need that. It's good to have it, and we need to learn it in school. But as far as using the method, you don't actually have to have that information yet, because the brain is so brilliant, it will find a workaround.
Mm. And so what's the process at the moment for being able to use your flashcards on your website? I mentioned before you've got the website flashcardread.com.
Yes. So for 2 weeks, they get to try it out for free. They just put in their email, they sign up, and I hope they don't mind, putting in their email, but it helps me track what's going on within the website. And if things aren't working, I'm able to help communicate with them and talk to them about what's, not working as we're, working on all the bugs for this new website. But on flashcardread.com, they'll see a pop-up and they'll say, it'll say 2 weeks free. They'll just put their email in there, and then they'll go to programs, and then they'll see week 1 for free, and then they'll sign up, and then they start just like that.
Mm.
And then
And
they'll go to, and then the same thing.
yeah, that's fascinating. So in terms of the results that you're seeing with your experience of doing this flashcard reading, how is that? Is that having any sort of knock-on effects with regards to the dyslexia or the ADHD at all?
You mean as far as helping?
Yeah, yeah.
It's building confidence in their abilities, which will have a ripple effect, later on in their lives. If they can conquer reading, just think of how much more they'll be able to conquer and enjoy, because, the trajectory of their lives and their pathways have totally changed. They're being told that they're dumb or that they're incapable anymore. There are words that I've heard that poor children have had to endure, even myself, growing up. So I think that it just changes lives, as soon as they understand and they build that confidence. And as the weeks go by, I mean, they understand that they are neurodivergent. They understand that there is no longer a problem, and that everything's wide open for them.
Hmm. And I like every person is different, but is there a um typical amount of time that it takes before you notice that they're able to start getting some confidence with that reading or that initial stage?
Usually within the first week is when I see the big change happening, the shift, at the flashing ability, actually able to spell. And when they make that spelling connection, and when they get to the end of that week and they're able to spell a majority of those words correctly without having me, do it on the video, they're amazed at themselves. And
Mm.
they understand that this is no longer going to be a hindrance to them, and they're excited. And I always tell, parents, you want to reward them properly, especially if they're young children. But a lot of parents haven't even had to reward, because the reward is they get to read.
Hmm. Yeah, it certainly is. I mean, I remember when my youngest daughter started to have that light bulb moment of being able to read, because it'd taken her a little while longer, and there was a certain element of frustration or not wanting to necessarily read because she found it difficult. So there wasn't that impulse to do something that was challenging, or something that she found that was significantly more difficult. But when it happened and she started to have that success with reading, and she could actually understand things that were written down, because she'd always ask, what does that mean? What this? Um, she she asked for a series of books, and like her face lit up. She would actually spend like, almost like hours reading, and she just skyrocketed in terms of her ability to read. The teacher said that that she had a really a reading age above her actual age, when it had just taken that little bit more time in comparison to get there. But yeah, the gift of reading is certainly wonderful to witness in a small child. You say specifically that the importance of celebrating your victories. How do you encourage that within the program?
Well, I just tell parents, just think of yourself in that position and think of yourself, being closed off from the rest of the world. And all of a sudden it opens up and you want to keep them excited. You want to keep that energy going. And anybody knows that if you've ever, been in a work environment that is, not very nice, it's not fun to work there. So make it fun for your child to do the work, make it fun and exciting, and get excited, have the reward be to go to Barnes and Nobles or some wonderful bookstore and buy the thing that interests them the most, maybe on paleontology or dinosaurs or a greater math or whatever it is that
Mm,
flips their lid, just get them super juiced up and excited because you're investing in loving your child at the same time. And any time that you're excited about learning is going to pay off in great dividends in the future.
mm. Yeah, and there's an awful lot of autonomy and independence that comes with being able to read, um and that in and of itself is a sort of very uplifting thing as you're growing up. The thought that you can sort of do all these things on your own, or be able to find out the things that you want to find out by
Absolutely.
yourself. Um, and I'm just interested. This is going back to a point you made towards the beginning. Sorry, it's just sometimes
No,
things
no,
flash
that's
up
what
in my head. But
mm,
so I don't have any experience of dyslexia myself, and so with the way you described the motion of the words, spinning round and appearing back to front. How did that feel? I mean, was that disorientating? Did you get headaches or anything like that?
it would it would cause, like, my head to hurt. It would cause, me to have stomach problems. You either develop it like, the stress level either goes to your head or your stomach. That's what, Chinese medicine has taught us, 4,000 years of it. So my stress was in my stomach. I would, just harbor over the fact that I could not do what other kids were being asked to do. I would harbor over the fact that I didn't get a lot of free time because I was spending all my time trying to catch up. So, I was just going at it with everything I had, but I didn't get a lot of support at home. But I also believe that they were doing the best that they could, because we just didn't have a whole lot of information in the past. I mean, that was 1977, 78. And so we're still barely scraping, what is involved with dyslexia and ADHD. I mean, we're just kind of getting a handle on what it is and what we can do and some therapies that are helping. So, we're just on the kind of cutting edge of everything. So I don't blame anybody for what's
Mm,
happened. But I also know that, we need a better way in which to incorporate how kids are feeling, and to work out those feelings and then to champion these kids because once they figure out, how their brain works, I mean, we just need to stand back and let them shine.
mm. You mentioned stress just then in relation to you sort of feeling stress in the stomach. But you also said at the beginning that when you were talking about your dyslexia, that it was stress-induced dyslexia. So it was. So I'm just trying to. It was probably like a chicken and the egg. I'm just trying to understand the order in which it was. Was the stress something else, and that was causing dyslexia, or was the fact that these words were jumbled up that you felt the stress and it was how does that
Have you have you ever walked into an environment before and just felt instantly like there was a bunch of stress in the room and people that were in the room were stressed?
yeah,
That's the
yeah,
way
yeah,
a lot of kids feel when they walk into a classroom.
uh-huh.
So you've got that first, right? You
Yeah.
already know that you're not probably going to succeed to the best of your ability. You're already being told that you're not successful. You already know that you don't have the tools in which to succeed like everyone else.
Mm.
So you've got all of that, on your shoulders, so to
Yeah.
speak. And so you have butterflies in your stomach. You've got a test coming up that you're trying to study for unsuccessfully. So how would that make you feel? I mean, how would that make anyone feel that that the cards are already stacked against you, that no one really understands what you're going through and or maybe even care. So and the people that are teaching may not be able to help, and so that's pressure on them as well. So you're already feeling that, that energy around you. And so how do you get on top of it? How do you get through it? Well, I can tell you, recess is an outlet,
Mm.
PE, goodness
Mm.
for PE. Thank God for my art teachers. I think that's the only reason why I stayed in high school. Um, they kept me focused and kept me believing that, that education was, doable. But, the struggle is real for a lot of these kids for, 20% and over. There's a bunch of kids not reading on grade level, so they're all that pressure builds up like a pressure cooker, and they feel it every day.
Mm. No, I can that resonates with me. Like last year, whilst I was sort of in my old job, and was reaching sort of burnout levels. Every time I had to sort of hold a workshop or some sort of run a meeting beforehand, like an hour or two before, my brain was preparing for it and getting tense, and I'd be going to the toilet every 5 minutes, and just sort of building up that stress and panic and stuff like that. So I can certainly, when you talk about that experience, it does bring it back a little bit. But I wonder, so how is your own dyslexia now? Because I'm excuse my ignorance, but dyslexia is not anything that you would cure necessarily. So how does
I've
your brain
had
process the words now?
So, I learned, through flashing that I could store massive amounts of information in my brain. So, through flashing, I guess you could say I streamlined myself to not need it anymore. And now when I read a page, I'm able to speed read and then gather the keywords so that I can, spit them out or regurgitate them, write about them, because it's being stored in not just short-term memory, but long-term memory. And so anything you store in long-term memory, you're gonna be able to apply later in different ways. So using my brain more, I guess, would be the short answer for what you
Hmm.
just
Now,
and continuing to work on tools like this so that I can remember everything that needs to be remembered with dyslexia and ADHD.
so it's something you just mentioned there regarding the speed reading. That's something that's always fascinated me. So I'm just wondering, I've never really tried to. I've always liked the idea of it, and I just wonder, does the method of the flashcards help with speed reading?
Yes, the accuracy is picked up over time, and as they practice, and the flashcard moves onto the page, they're able to read faster and with more fluency. And once that happens, comprehension goes up, and then the speed reading kind of happens naturally, from what I am witnessing.
Fascinating. So even if, let's just say, I'm reading, but I'm an
Mhm.
adult. Would I be able to use the flashcard um process to if I wanted to learn reading at all?
Well, to answer that question is interesting because some of the children that are advanced are using it to further their vocabularies and spelling techniques, and through that, they're able to speed up their reading. So I guess the answer to your question is yes.
So it's an ongoing tool that you can use regardless of whether you're using it to learn to read. You can actually learn it to enhance your reading.
You can, yes, yes, and there reaches a point where the brain no longer needs it and would get bored of the system. So when you reach that boredom and then you realize you don't need it, then I'm just a distant memory, and then the mind takes over from there, and it's a wonderful thing to see, to no longer be needed.
Mm. Well, it's all fascinating, and I've really enjoyed our conversation today, and I really thank you so much for taking the time. And I wish you all the best with your. You say your the website is new at the moment. You're testing.
No, it's up and running, and, anytime that somebody wants to get on, they can. I made these for your YouTubers, but I'll also, explain what they are. This is, Para Solutions, Education I'm sorry, Para Education Solutions. And here is a QR code if, somebody wants to copy that, and I do, one-on-one coaching. I do group coaching, anything that they wanna know, about their abilities or disabilities, and neurodiversity, I try to help them understand that. And I also have one for my website, which is, Flashcard Read, with a QR code. If they wanna pause it and get that information, it'll take it to both places, and they can DM me on Facebook. We can go back and forth, and I can answer some questions, whatever they need to do. They can also email me through my website. But we have a lot of kids signing up every day. We have a lot of questions, and the number one question is, why isn't this already out there? And my response to that is that, like I said, we're just on the brink of understanding education and how the brain works. So give patience to our teachers, our administrators, our schools, because we're just, trying to figure out how best to serve these students that, quite aren't getting it in conventional ways.
Mm, fantastic. Well, yeah, if you send those to me, I'll be able to put those on some social posts as
Absolutely.
well. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us. And I wish you all the best with getting this out there. And yeah, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Okay, take care. Bye bye. Well, there we have it. Thank you so much for listening this far. If you want to hear more episodes, then please subscribe on YouTube or whatever podcast platform you use. It really helps to spread the word. So if you know anyone this episode could help, then please share it with your friends. If you want to follow me on social media, I am on Instagram at ADHD_goals, and you can find me on Facebook too. If you want to get in touch with the show, then you can email me at hello@adhdgoals.co. And finally, if you're struggling to manage your ADHD and you would like me to be your coach, then please head over to my website and get in touch. Until next time, bye for now.